Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Workplace Compass. This is our VWV podcast series designed to help employers navigate the latest employment law developments. My name's Jess. I'm a legal director and knowledge lawyer in the employment team here at VWV, and I'm joined today by Kiki Dawes.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kiki. I'm a partner in the employment team here, and today's episode, we're looking at the introduction of equality action plans linked to gender pay gap reporting.
Yeah, so let's start by setting the scene. So since 2017, large employers have been required to publish their gender pay gap data annually, both on their own website and on a publicly available government portal.
That's right. And while many employers already include a narrative explaining the figures, there's never been a legal requirement to take action to address any gender pay gap which has been identified.
And that is what is now going to be changing. So under the new framework, large employers with 250 or more staff are going to be required to publish an equality action plan alongside the gender pay gap data. And this is expected to become mandatory from spring 2027.
Yeah, but before that, from April 2026, employers will be able to produce and publish these plans on a voluntary basis. And the government has already issued some guidance to support those early adopters.
Yeah, and that guidance is quite helpful. So it makes it clear that the legal requirement itself is relatively modest. So employers are going to need to commit to at least one action to reduce their gender pay gap and at least one action to support employees who are experiencing menopause.
Although the supporting guidance does go much further, and it sets out a wide range of suggested actions which really act as a benchmark, I think, for good practice rather than a strict legal requirement.
Let's have a look at some of those suggested actions then. So on gender pay gap reduction, there's a strong focus on recruitment practices. So for example, making job descriptions more inclusive, avoiding gendered language and focusing on skills and behaviour rather than rigid criteria.
Yeah, and employers are also encouraged to make their policies more visible, such as advertising flexible working and leave arrangements in job adverts themselves. And that can make a real difference in attracting a broader and more diverse pool of candidates.
There's also a focus on reducing bias in recruitment processes, and that can include anonymising CVs or using structured interviews to ensure more consistent decision making.
And then looking at beyond recruitment, the guidance is also highlighting some points around development and progression. So, for example, ensuring employees are actively considered for promotion, offering mentoring or sponsorship, and creating clearer pathways for progression.
And there's also an emphasis on transparency, particularly around pay, and as well as promotion and reward structures. And that can help build trust and address potential disparities over time as well.
And then also on menopause, the guidance reflects what many employers will already recognise as good practice. So that includes training managers, offering occupational health support, and considering workplace adjustments such as flexibility or changes to the working environment.
Yeah, and it also suggests more structured steps like carrying out menopause risk assessments and reviewing policies to ensure that they're fit for purpose.
Yeah, and I think one of the important points to note about the guidance is that it emphasises that approaches should be tailored. So a one size fits all solution is unlikely to be effective, given the range of experiences and roles across a workforce.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that is one of the key points to highlight, I think. And I think another important point is that employers are encouraged to take a data-led approach, which means analysing their workforce data to identify issues and then tracking progress over time in order to essentially measure whether the actions they're committing to are actually making a difference.
And I think there's also a clear expectation of senior leadership involvement and involvement at that level. So action plans will need to be signed off at a senior level, and appropriate resources are going to have to be allocated to support the implementation.
So in terms of timing then, employers can choose to publish the voluntary action plan alongside the gender pay gap reports this year or during the 2026 to 2027 reporting year, as you've said, Kiki. And the reporting deadline for that is going to apply in the same way as it does for gender pay gap reporting. So late March for most public sector employers and early April for private and the voluntary sector.
And then looking ahead, so once the requirement becomes mandatory in 2027, employers are going to need to publish their action plans on the government reporting portal alongside their gender pay gap data.
So one final point to highlight is around enforcement. So the gender pay gap framework has been criticised from time to time for lacking teeth in terms of the consequences and the penalties for non-compliance. We don't know very much yet about enforcement for this new framework, but the government has indicated that it's going to be publishing more guidance soon on that.
Yeah, and there will be enforcement around the obligation to publish. So further detail on that is expected in the regulations.
So what then should employers be doing now?
Well, I think it's a really good opportunity to take stock. I mean, many employers will already have great initiatives in place, but it's about bringing those together in a more structured and transparent way.
And starting early is going to help, isn't it? So using this voluntary period to test what works in practice is going to put employers in a much stronger position ahead of the mandatory reporting coming in next year. And it's probably also worth a quick note to mention where this sits in terms of the wider direction of travel on pay gap reporting, because some listeners might remember that around this time last year, the government consulted on extending mandatory pay gap reporting to ethnicity and disability pay gaps, but we are still waiting for the outcome of that consultation.
Yeah, and the proposal was also broadly to build on the existing gender pay gap framework. So it's likely to mean requiring large employers to report similar metrics for ethnicity and disability alongside the additional workforce data to provide context, such as representation and disclosure rates.
And there was also a question in that consultation around whether employers should be required to produce action plans in those areas as well. So there's a clear link between that consultation and what we're now seeing on gender and menopause action plans.
Yeah, so, but I think the important point to note for now is at this stage, nothing's been finalised on disability and ethnicity pay gap reporting, and we're still waiting for the next steps to be confirmed on that one. So I think that's all we're going to talk about on that one. So thanks for joining us today, everyone.
Yeah, thanks very much, everybody. And if you found this update helpful, again, please do like and subscribe to this podcast so that you don't miss any future episodes. So until next time, bye for now.
Bye.